Hello everyone, this is the CRT Productions, and well, here we are. This is the end for our not so old friend, although I guess it is old now, at least according to Microsoft. Microsoft has determined that 10 years old is pretty old, and I just realized the implications of that statement. I am not suicidal. But this is it for Windows 10 here. I've got my old trusty Goodwill setup here going in the background, installing the latest updates, because I haven't plugged it in a little bit, and I did have a few updates to install. And yeah, this thing, you know, old 2012 desktop here, 2011, 2012, approximately, Intel 2nd generation processor. This thing runs just fine. Has Office 2019 installed on it, Microsoft Office 2019, not 365, not any of the cloud-based stuff, but regular old Office 19. I run virtual machines on this system. I use it for just kind of general basic usage, usually when I print stuff out, if I have a document, when I write up scripts, or the rare occasion when I script one of my videos, I usually type it up on there and print it out. But yeah, now Microsoft has deemed that operating system to no longer be in operation, I suppose. It is kind of weird though to think that when I created this YouTube channel in 2014, Windows 10 didn't exist yet. Unless you count the weird insider version, whatever it was called. I took a look at it a few years back on this channel. You can take a look at that video if you like. October 1st, 2014. It says, join the Windows Insider program and get the Windows 10 technical preview. And this is talking about the introduction of the Windows Insider program, which of course is still going on. See, so that's not there. It gives the error again. It comes up when you click the Start menu, apparently. Explorer.exe. So there's a lot of stuff that is just not present yet. But it is the first version of Windows that I have sort of watched come and go in my lifetime. Of course, several versions have come and gone during my lifetime, but it's the first version since I started paying attention and caring about such things that has started out and, of course, seen its end of life today, October 14th. Back in summer of 2015, I installed Windows 10 for free when they offered the free upgrade. It was the first time they'd done something like that. I took it, I installed it a couple days after whatever the date was for that upgrade. Of course, a couple days later, because my internet at the time was pretty bad and it took that long to download it, I eventually got it installed on this very laptop right here, this Toshiba Satellite L755. And yeah, it was, you know, it was an experience. It had its bugs, it certainly had its quirks, had its problems, but I stuck with it. Some reason. I got a new laptop not too long after, but yeah, it was an interesting experience. Certainly from the beginning. Generally, the adoption rate for Windows versions is kind of slow, but now this is pretty much the only time ever, since I guess the first version of Windows was released in the 80s, where there's only been one supported version of Windows. When Windows Vista was launched, Windows XP was still supported, 2000 was still supported. This is kind of an unprecedented time now, and you know, considering years ago when Microsoft, yeah, I'm going there again, they mentioned years ago that Windows 10 was going to be the last version of Windows. Well, spoiler alert, that didn't happen. Windows 10 has been, support has been ended for that operating system as of today, and now we're only left with Windows 11. So even though Windows 10 could technically run on this old Pentium M notebook from 2006, that's not going to be my argument here in this video. I'm just going to go back to 2012 or 2013 with this Optiplex 7010 system right here. This is a system I did get from Goodwill, as deemed from my self-printed Goodwill sticker there, but more specifically the price tag there, 25 bucks. My $25 Goodwill system here is complete with the operating system, the hard drive, everything. The only thing I added to it was a wireless card, but that's of course completely optional. And you can see here, running Windows 10, we can actually pull up here, Win Oh shoot, that's within my virtual machine, which I was going to demonstrate in a second. Hang on, WinVersion. There it is. We are running Windows 10 22H2 latest version right there, licensed to owner, completely local account. Yeah, and you can see here what's wrong with this system. See there, we're using 35% of our CPU, running a virtual machine here, Windows 7. We can launch stuff in Windows 7. This thing runs perfectly fine. There it is. Over here, we're downloading updates in the background even. So, you know, use 21% of our network, everything. This thing runs perfectly fine, perfectly smooth. We can minimize that and open up Word here. I hope that it doesn't show anything strange when I open that up. Is it the fastest system in the world? No, but, you know, it works. And there's Word. We can open up... what else? We can open up this PDF reader program here. There's that. Foxit Reader. Pretty well-known software. I highly recommend it. It is paid, however. You can use it for free. I'll open up Audacity. Why not? Free audio editing software. Yeah, we've got all that stuff open. We can open up Firefox. Go to Google. Google. Search Google. Yeah, why not? And there it is. That's within the virtual machine. Now we can go here to Microsoft Edge within Windows 10. Open that up with all the other programs opened up in down here, down in the bottom. And go here, go to google.com because we don't want to use Bing today. And there it is. And there you have it. It is October the 14th as well, by the way. Nothing wrong with this system whatsoever. Perfectly usable system. So given all that information, this perfectly usable system here, multitasking, running several different programs at the same time, as well as 2 different operating systems at the same time in a virtual machine, what is the reason that now Windows 11 is not compatible with that system? Of course, you can modify an ISO file and install Windows 11 unofficially on there. Now, setup is starting. This is breaking. I am trying to get a internet connection out here. It takes about 3 days for the internet to get past from the tower to my location. At the moment, it is a bit like satellite communications with astronauts, but we are trying here with the Apple iPhone with no guarantees of support with that. But why can we not just do it officially? Windows 7, the original operating system for that system, ran perfectly fine on it. Windows 10 came along, there was no difference. You run Windows 10 on almost any system that Windows 7 could run on. Windows 7 can technically run on very, very old systems, not very well obviously, but it could run on like the original Pentium processor from 1993. There's videos of people doing that on YouTube. I highly recommend looking them up. It's humorous. Not usable, but humorous and possible. Now we've got Windows 11 here, and it is sort of artificially forcing people to upgrade to systems from approximately 2018 or newer for no real reason. Of course, the usual security argument is for your security. It's because we care about you here at Microsoft. We want you to be safe on the internet. Now, most of the messaging about Windows 11 has come from third parties, especially tech reviewers and tech sites, news sites and whatnot, saying Windows 10's end date is this date. You need to upgrade before that date, etc., etc. But there's never really a why. Why do I need to upgrade my Windows? Why do I need to buy a new computer? Support is ending. Okay, why is support ending for Windows 10? Well, Microsoft doesn't really have a good answer for that. Doesn't seem anyway. And the numbers go to show that. Let's take a look at a few numbers and talk about those. Alright, well, what would you expect? Of course, I'm going to record this on Windows 7 to own the Windows fanboys, but anyhow, let's take a look at some historic charts here, some historic data, and see how previous versions of Windows did at the beginning and ends of their lifespans. Now, Windows 7 was, of course, released at the very end of 2009. I don't remember exactly when, but towards the end of 2009, I should say. And it's kind of obvious because it doesn't really have any market share. It has a tiny little bit here in July of 2009. But yeah, you can see Windows Vista, this was pretty much the peak of its market share right here. It got to about a quarter of the Windows total market share, but Windows XP was still just totally like almost 80%, by 2009, beginning of 2009, and then by the end of 2009, 69% was, that's kind of crazy. But we can go a little further into 2010 here and take a look at some more of those statistics. Here we can see Windows XP falling January 2010. It's kind of steadily falling. Most people are just kind of sticking with that. Windows XP, and you can see Windows 7 surpasses Windows Vista pretty quickly. Most people that were on Vista were, I guess, kind of tech savvy type people and wanted to use Windows Vista. Wanted to use the latest version of Windows, even if it wasn't that great. And yeah, you can see they pretty much not like 0.03. That's like one person in the world was using Windows 98. But you can see Windows XP is just dominating, and Windows 7 kind of slowly creeps up there and eventually takes it over. We can go beyond that though to 2014, which was Windows XP's end of life. Its end of life was towards the middle, I think it's April of 2014. So you can see April 2014, Windows XP at 19%. So still plenty of people were sticking with it, but by then Windows 7, of course, dominated the market. Almost everybody was there, not quite 80% like Windows XP, but yeah, there was kind of a mix. There were people still using Windows Vista, Windows 8, and stuff, and of course plenty of people using XP. When the devil's Windows 2003, is that the server version of it? I don't know. Very interesting, but anyhow, Windows 7 dominating the charts. Now we can go ahead to 2020. Now, of course, we know which one is in the lead by then, Windows 10. So Windows 10 was launched in 2015. I thought I had 2015 loaded up. There it is, a little out of order there, but never mind that. 2015, the year after 2014, so let's get back on track here. In 2014, 2015, chart looks pretty much the same. Not much difference there, but you can see here Windows 8.1 surprisingly did capture a bit of the market in 2015. But pretty much as soon as Windows 10 is launched, people move to that because, I won't say most people, but a decent amount of people compared to what we're used to. A lot of people did have a positive opinion of Windows 10 when it was launched. It was mostly because of Windows 8 being a complete flop. Everybody hated it. And most people didn't even consider Windows 8.1 to exist, and myself included. But people looked past that and saw Windows 10, the next real major version of Windows. Windows 10 fixes some of those problems, goes back to some Windows 7 sort of styles, but has some more modern features and compatibility. And you can see there the numbers reflect that sentiment very quickly. Same year, it's already up to, what is it there? 14% there at the end of 2015. There's also, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the free update that did help, and you can see a noticeable little dip in Windows 7 market share. It slowly declines down below 60% in 2015. Go ahead to 2020. This is the end of life for Windows 7. Windows 7's end of life was actually in January of 2020, but there was still a quarter of them. The Windows market was still on Windows 7 at that time. You can see there it kind of drops a little bit, but then it just kind of steadies out here around 20%. There's still a lot of people using Windows 7. There were a lot of computers on Windows 7, you got to think. During Windows 7's reign as the most popular version of Windows, the version that was being included on OEM systems, a lot of people were either buying their first or their second computers. People that bought computers years and years ago with Windows XP on it or older than that, they would have been ready for an upgrade in the early 2010s when Windows 7 was the current version. But then there's also the people that were a little bit later. Maybe they just kind of use computers at the library or at school, etc., but they didn't have any need to own their own computer until, of course, the internet was pretty much where you do everything, including shopping and banking and stuff like that. Essential things are done on the computer. You need a computer at home. They finally bought one. Poor people that, can't just drop $1,000 on a fancy computer. They bought their first computer during that kind of very early 2010s, when the internet was starting to take over the world a little bit. So you can see here, Windows 10 and 2020, pretty much everything right there. I mean, Windows 7 and Windows 10 combined are everything. The next one is Windows 8.1. Probably just a few laptops that featured that operating system. People still using those. That was perfectly fine. So just a quick recap on 2020. We can see here on this chart, Windows 10 current operating system. It's 2020. I know 2020 not a good time, but anyway, Windows 10 very much in the lead. It was the current version of Windows. People had adopted it. There was still the few people using Windows 7. This is worldwide, by the way, so if we went to a specific region, it would be a lot different. But worldwide, even in developing countries here, Windows 10 is dominating the Windows market share. Fast forward to 2025, well, of course, Windows 10 isn't unsupported yet, whereas here, Windows 7 was unsupported in January of 2020. But, just for fun, let's go back to 2019. Just a little bit of fun. Let's take a look at the 2019 chart here. And we can see here, there's not really any battle here. Even at the beginning of 2019, Windows 7 was at 35%, Windows 10 well over 50%, and they just keep on spreading out, separating from each other on the chart. 2025, things are going a little bit different from Windows 11. You can see here Windows 10 still well above 50%, over 60% at the beginning of the year. It starts to kind of dwindle, it goes down. They actually kind of meet here. They're practically exactly the same, within 1% of each other. And then, what happens? Windows 11, it takes a little bit of a lead, then it goes right back down, and Windows 10 is back within a few percent of it. Then they spread out a little bit more this past month, September. This is something I'm going to cover in a future video. Subscribe if you're interested in that. Different phenomenon altogether. But never mind that. So you can't really compare this to Windows Vista per se. You can see here in 2009, Windows Vista like 25%, but as soon as Windows 7 is launched, to go to 2010, it just overtakes it. There's no, nobody complains. Like Windows 7, good. We like Windows 7. We're going to use Windows 7. Windows Vista's market share very slowly goes down. I guess probably a lot of people bought a Windows Vista computer and like, well, we just bought this thing. I'm not going to upgrade, but a lot of people did want to upgrade to Windows 7. 2025, not a lot of people want to upgrade to Windows 11. Needless to say, it's on your screen here. I don't need to really explain what's there. So, when Microsoft tells you that you should probably stop using that old version of Windows that we sold you, it doesn't mean that you have to stop using it, of course. I've demonstrated it time and time again on this channel. Windows 7's end of life in 2020, I've demonstrated that it was still perfectly usable, along with Windows Vista and Windows XP once upon a time, not at the time of their end of life, however. I still use older operating systems on a regular basis on this channel, and I can't say that I recommend that necessarily for everybody, but just as someone who is a hobbyist, it's a hobby of mine. I enjoy using older computers, such as this one over here on my left, or the one behind me. According to most people, by most people's standards, that would be very old, or this one right here. How about that for old? With the GTX 285 in there. So, by most people's standards, that is quite an old system, and well, it actually is. But anyway, doesn't mean that, that system, which is perfectly capable of running Windows 10, doesn't mean that that thing needs to go to the junkyard all of a sudden just because Windows 11 doesn't support it. So, you know, there's going to be the people out there that shame you. That's bad. You're going to kill everybody by using Windows 10 beyond October 14th. But yeah, for me, I'm going to be using Windows 10 on my system that I have it on. I'm still using Windows 7 on that old HP laptop that I just recorded the previous section of the video on. And that's just it. Sorry if that upsets you, but that's just it. And that's how it will continue to be here at the CRT Productions. So if you'd like to see more things like that, some more Reddit rule breaking, I guess, Redditor rule breaking, like using old versions of Windows, hit the subscribe button and you'll see plenty more of it here. Join the Discord server if you'd like to speak with like-minded individuals. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there. Except for on the internet. Don't stay safe there. That's no fun.